to learn how to create text on a path and animate it along that path. This will serve to basically treat each letter as its own object, and it will follow that path as the text slides along. So first thing we're going to do is create a new composition, and we're going to call this text on a path. Let's call it text on a path 1. There we go. 1920 by 1080. And we are going to set the length to 2 seconds. And then click OK. All right, now we're going to go over to our text tool. So click on the big T up in the toolbar there. And we're going to open up our text properties, the character, and make sure impact is the typeface. If it's another one, just click in there, and then you can type IMP, and it should bring up a little search and show impact. There's no bold or any other alternate fonts, it's just impact. Now we're going to set the size of the typeface to 500 pixels. And then just hit tab. And that's great. All right, now we're going to go ahead and click over here on the left, kind of almost to the edge, but not all the way. And we're going to type big text in all caps. All right, and then choose your selection tool, and then deselect, and then go ahead and let's click on it again, and we're going to open up the align panel, and we're going to align horizontally and align vertically. There we go. Now when we do this, usually we'll recenter the anchor point, but we're not going to recenter the anchor point this time. We're going to leave its default lower left corner position here on our text because we need the anchor point to be there in order to make sense of some of the values that we're going to be editing to make this thing animate. All right, now make sure the layer is selected, and we're going to choose the pen tool, and we're going to draw a path. Now, normally if you draw a shape with a layer selected, it creates a mask. And that is exactly what happens if we use the pen tool. But we're not going to close our path, so we're not drawing something like this to create a mask. What we are doing is we are going to click and drag to create a bezier. Click and drag up here, click and drag here, and then finally up here, click and drag. Cool. All right, now what that does is it is a mask. You can see it's created a mask down here in our composition timeline panel. But because the path is not completed, meaning it doesn't go all the way back to the beginning, it's not going to mask anything yet, but it is technically still a mask. All right, I'm going to go back to my selection tool now and make sure nothing is selected. And I want to open up the text layer. So if your text layer is closed like that, we're going to twirl down to open up some of our properties. And we want to open up the text properties. So because this is a text object, there's additional properties that apply to the text itself. And I want to twirl down path options, and right here for path it says none. We don't have a motion path, we haven't created one yet, but I'm going to choose mask 1 as the path. Now mask 1 is this mask that we drew with the pen tool. And the text path options are different than the position options. If we wanted to animate this whole text block along a path, we could do that, but it will not bend the text as individual letters like this. It would be aligned to the anchor point, and the anchor point would be moving along that path. But because this is a text object, we have a path that can go along that doesn't relate to the anchor point, it looks at each individual letter and places it on that path. Okay, we have some options here. We can reverse, which makes it go underneath and in the opposite direction. We have force alignment, which stretches it from what's called the first margin to the last margin, or left margin and right margin. They don't say left and right because if you reverse these, then the first and the last are on opposite ends of it, and then left is right and right is left. So they just say first and last. And then the first margin. This is the value that we can change to move this little vertical red slider. Whenever you type text, you generally have a cursor to indicate where the letters are going to end up when you're typing. And so we can set this, if we click and drag to the right, that first margin, which is right to the left and below the very first letter, moves along that path. And so if we want to, we could slide this all the way off to bring our text outside. And if we click on our stopwatch, we create a keyframe at this point right here. Now if I go to the end of the timeline, and now I take this value and I slide it to the right, so much that all of the text is completely off. You might need to pick up your mouse and move it again. Now over 2 seconds, this text looks like a roller coaster going all across that path. And that's how we do text on a path. We're going to learn how to do a track mat using text. We've done this with a custom shape, using it to define a mask on a particular area. And now we're going to use text to define that area that's visible to actually create a mask. So first thing we're going to do is create a new composition. So I'm going to click on my new comp icon here in my project files, or with this panel selected, I can hit Command N to create a new composition. And so I'm going to call this one text as TrackMat 1. And it's going to be 1920 by 1080, and we're going to do 2-second duration, just like the previous one. Click OK. All right. Now you can see here, this is our previous composition that we worked on, and that's a previous video. And here is the one that we just created. And we are going to create something new. We're going to create another copy of big text. Now, in class, I duplicated this composition so that we could access this big text layer, but what ended up happening was folks ended up nesting their compositions, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to have in the video, we're just going to create a brand new text or a brand new composition, and then continue on with what we're going to have as far as contents. Okay, blah 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 blah. So first up, I'm going to choose the text tool. Again, open up my character, make sure I go to impact. If impact's not there, I can type in that field IMP, which turns it into a search field, finding the impact typeface. And I'm going to set the size of the type to 500 pixels. And I'm going to click on my composition window, kind of here in the, almost to the edge in the lower third area, and in all caps, big text. Cool. I'm going to go back to my selection tool, deselect, and then reselect the layer. And up in my align panel, I'm going to align horizontally and align vertically. So my big text is right in the middle. Okay, cool. So now what I want to do is bring in an image. In the initial instructions in the assignment, it has you download a couple things. You're going to download one that's footage, which is a fire, and then one that is this cracked stone wall. So I'm going to click in this area here, double click, then I'm going to find that image there, open it up. Cool. I kind of did that pretty fast. Let's go back to that again. Sometimes create composition gets checked and we don't want to do that. I'm not creating a new composition for this image. I'm just importing the image and that's all. So I'm going to click open there. All right, and there's the image. And I'm going to drag this image down into my comp layers. Awesome. And in order to make this big text layer the track mat for that image, I'm just going to click this drop down here. Now, if you don't see the mode or the track mat columns in your layers panel, just right click anywhere in this empty space here to the right of the source name, the column title there, and go to columns, and then modes is the one that you want to enable. So if you don't see the track mat column or the mode column, just right click up here, columns, and then enable modes, and that brings you both the mode and the track mat. And I'm going to click on the drop down here and choose big text as the mat. And so now this text defines what's viewable from this image here. Whenever a track mat is engaged, After Effects automatically hides the visibility of that layer. The layer still exists, but if I want to see the layer, I can do that. But while the layer is visible, I'm not able to see this because it's track matted to that layer. So, and the only way the track mat's gonna work is if I engage that. And then the cool thing about this is that if I have track mat on a static object, I can use some of my animation, my keyframing, and I can adjust what's visible through that. I can make this, set the background to be, more representative of what I'm trying to communicate, or I can keyframe this and create some motion on this. Okay, and that's text as a track mat. We're going to do another track mat, but this time instead of matting a static image, this cracked background here, we're going to use the text to mat footage, and it's exactly the same process. So over here in my projects panel, project files panel, I'm going to click on new composition or Command N, and then I'm going to call this text as track mat 2 1920 by 1080, and the duration is going to be 2 seconds. Again, click OK. Awesome. And just like we did before, we're going to create a new text here, and the character is going to be impact 500 pixels. Click over here, and I'm going to type big text in all caps again. Choose my selection tool to deselect, and then select that layer, and I'm going to align it to the center. So horizontally and vertically, there it's now it's in the center. Deselect that. And then in my project panel files here, I'm going to double click, and now I'm going to import this footage that we downloaded. It's fire footage. We're not going to create a composition, so make sure that is not checked. And I'm going to pull that down below my big text here. The stacking order of these layers doesn't really matter. Back in the olden days it used to, but in newer versions of After Effects you can track mat regardless of where it's at in the layer stack, which is really cool. Okay, so before I do the track mat, I'm going to play this footage, and there's the explosion. Very cool. And so to track mat that, just like we did before, I'm going to click that drop down. I'm going to choose big text as the track mat, and it looks like everything's gone dark, which is fine. What's actually happening though is that we've track matted that footage, and the first couple frames of it, it's just black. And so when I play, then we see the flame coming through there. So let me turn my pixels back on here. And that's how we track matte footage. This next one, we're going to revisit the text on the path, but we're going to create some duplication using an effect so that we don't have to manually duplicate this layer or create multiple comps. We can just do it using an effect. And that effect inside has a lot of expressions built into it. And it just makes our work easier. So I'm going to go and create a new composition. And this one's going to be called Text on a Path to. Same preset, 1920 by 1080, 2-second duration, and click OK. All right, and I'm going to just repeat what we already did with the that first composition. Text tool. Make sure that my character is impact 500 pixels. Click over here, big text. Choose my selection tool, deselect, then select the layer. Go to my alignment panel. Align horizontally and vertically. And then I'm going to choose a pen tool. And I'm going to create a path. Very similar to the one that we drew before. Cool. Now if I twirl down my options here for big text, I go to text, and I can see there's masks now. There's only one though. It's this mask one. It's this thing right here. And I know that's it because the color of this path is this like seafoam green, and it's the same color identification down here. So that's how we know this is the mask that we just created. So I'm going to choose path options, twirl path options down, and then under path, I'm going to tell the text, instead of having no path, I want you to follow mask 1. All right, now nothing's going to happen because we have to change our first margin in order to create some kind of motion there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this back so that the text is all the way off the comp. I'm going to create a keyframe there. I'm going to go all the way to the end. And then I'm going to scrub forward here on this value until it pushes that first margin all the way off of the comp window. Okay, so this is what we did in that first composition. No biggie. But what I want to do is I want this text to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to, with my big text selected, I wonder if I just open up characters and reduce the value here, if that does it. It sure does. So I'm going to slide that down to about 100 pixels. You can also click in there and type 100. Cool. Now, it's still going to slide all the way off to the left. It stops right there, but if we zoom out a smidge and I bring my playhead over to the left here, so this value of first margin defines that little red line right there. That's kind of the, what do we call that? I lost my mouse. Awesome. Come on, mouse. What's happening? Come back. Did the battery die? There we go. That was fun. Yeah, it's a fun journey. Okay. Now we're back. So that cursor is at the beginning of the text. And so this first margin value defines where that cursor is along this path. And it's not a direct left to right value. If it was, this setting this to 0 would put the text right here, and then setting it to 1920 would put the cursor all the way over here. This first margin value actually follows the length of this path. So because this path is curved and actually starts and ends outside of the composition, it is longer than 1920. And so that's why it needs a negative value to pull that text off. Now we reduce the size of that text, and so now having, originally we needed this left margin, or that first margin, to be all the way over here, because remember our text was 500 pixels. Now it's not, it's only 100. So we can actually bring that first margin a little closer to, and maybe even right at 0. So right now we're at -42. So we're just to the left of the 0 point. So if I set this to 0, you can see that my margin is right there at the beginning of this path, and I can just see the tail end of that text though. So that's why we need this to be a negative value. Cool. All right, and I'm going to bring this back into view here. And so now when I slide, make sure I did not mess up my keyframes. There we go. Yes, I believe in class I had somehow selected both keyframes, and so I kept changing the value and it was all over the place. So make sure you don't have both keyframes selected, and also make sure your playhead is on the keyframe that you want to adjust, because if you're over here and you make an adjustment, it creates a new keyframe there. That's not what we want to do. So we just want to change the keyframe that's at this spot here. All right, so our first margin is -56 in this scenario anyway. And moving it off, it still flows off of the composition, which is great. And so what I want to do is I want to create, basically I want to duplicate this text object. But I don't want to create actual manual physical duplicates. Like I don't want to make multiple copies of this and then have them, you know, start at offset times, which is how is one way to accomplish this. I just want to do it with the main text layer, and so I need to bring an effect in to do that. So the effect we're going to use, if we click on, and make sure your big text layer is selected. I'm going to choose effect, and this is something we're going to do over time. So it's going to be effect, time, and then echo. All right, and that applies the echo effect. Whenever you add an effect to a layer, the effects control panel opens up for the selected layer. If you have no layer selected, I guess it's still there. But if you were to select another layer, it would show the effects that that layer had selected. And if there were no effects, then it would just show no effects there. And so we have a couple different options here. We have the echo time. This is the time that elapses from the start of the motion. Now remember, we've got some keyframe animation here. And if I zoom in on this, let's see, that's what I don't want to get lost before. So you can see that's just very, very, very close together because our echo time is really, really tight. And so if we reduce this, slide it back, and we want to go in a negative direction, because that means it's going to go backwards or behind our initial one. The initial one is the one that's selected. So changing this to a positive value actually puts the echo in front of our original. And you may want to do that. That may be something that you would try. But for right now, we want this to be trailing, so it's going to be a negative value. And that negative value applies for each iteration of this. And right now we just have one echo. So if we change that, and we do 5 echoes, sorry, my dogs. now we get 5 copies, and we can tighten these up a little bit by adjusting this value. Whoops, it's pretty sensitive. Because this is in the effects controls, we actually can twirl this down and we get this little slider right here. I might make it a little easier. There we go. And so now when I play, we've got our echo. Last one is pretty cool. We're going to do a couple different things here. We've been working with text and masks. This is totally different. We're going to be using some modifier effects for shape. So what I want you to do first up is let's make a new composition. So we're going to go to our project files and choose create a new composition or Command N. And we're going to call this repeater 1920 by 1080. 2 seconds is the duration. Go ahead and click OK. And automatically I'm inside the repeater comp. I'm about to make some magic. So first thing I want to do is choose my ellipse tool. And if you hold down the Shift key, click and drag, it will create a circle. Now notice our anchor point is offset here, so we do want to fix that. So Command Option Home will center that. And go to your selection tool and just make sure it's still centered. Sometimes it does not center. Cool. And then I want to place this shape in the, or align it in the middle of my composition window. So I'm going to go to my alignment panel and then center align that. Make sure you center the anchor point first before doing the alignment, because the alignment for shape will align it based on the anchor point. It's different for other objects, but for shapes it's based on the anchor point. Cool. All right, so we're good so far. All right, next up we want to add, so right here in the contents we're going to add an effect called repeater. Click on that. Now we're not seeing anything because I failed to give this a stroke that has a color that's different than the background. It looks like my stroke color is, let's see if we can reveal it. There it is. It's set to black. So on your stroke, make sure you have no fill, number one. So if you click on the fill word, you can choose the no fill. And then stroke, you make sure you want to have this a solid color. There we go. Looks like I had a gradient possibly. And then the color, you can make it whatever you want. Do something like that. Awesome. So we see the repeater in action here. It's repeating. This is our center mark. We can see that this is our original bounding box of our original shape. And so we have 2 additional rings that are kind of going off to the right here. And that's how the repeater works. Well, let's look at some of the features of that. It's important to know that with a repeater, that it's tied to the position of your original. Just like the echo, it's connected to where the original position of that object is located. So I want to look at my contents here, and so I've got an ellipse and I've got a repeater that works on that ellipse, and I've got 3 copies. Let's increase that and see how many copies we've got. Well, it's quite a few there. And if you go to 0, it makes no copies, so it counts. The first copy counts, I guess, as the original. Now our offset is at 0, and what we'd like to do is bring that closer to the center. All right, so we can see our copies are at 3. And the copies include the original. It takes that original as a copy. So if I slide the offset over, you can see there's the 3 copies, but there's my original. It does not have a color on it. That's what part of the repeater does, is it kind of separates those guys, but you still have your original shape, but you have the ability to start your copies separate from where your original object is located. I'm going to leave that at 0 for right now. The effect we're trying to accomplish here is kind of like a wormhole or a tunnel that we're going through. And so we want to get these rings centered on each other so that we can then go big and small at the same time and then animate that transition. If they're doing this offset or starting at a position that's offset from the center, we can adjust that, and we will adjust that later on to do something kind of clever. But for right now, we need to make these things stack on top of each other. And so I'm going to adjust, not the transform, but I want to make sure and choose the transform for the repeater itself, not the transform for the layer. And so you can see it's 100 pixels is the offset. So I'm going to set that to 0. And then that should center all my rings on top of each other. And so they are stacked on top of each other. It's still doing a repeat. And then I'm going to scale this down so they kind of go into the background there. And now I'm going to bring this offset in. And so if I go with a negative value, we've got to be slow with that. I'll do -3 to start. We're starting bigger and going down to the size because we have a scale value. And so this original shape, think of it as being in the center of a stack that starts higher and goes back below it. Now it's hard to see with 3 copies, and so if we increase these, let's go maybe somewhere around 25 or 26. We can bring our scale up a little closer. And ideally what we want to do is we want to increase the scale so that that top shape goes all the way outside of the bounds of our composition. All right, now to make this animate, I'm going to turn on keyframe for the offset. So we started here at -3. That gave us enough size to be outside of the composition window, and I'm going to drag my plate all the way out to the end here, and I'm going to set this to, let's try just sliding it and see what it looks like. Oh, that's too many. Let's try 20. And so when I drag my playhead now, this is what I get.